Hey everybody, this is Craig from 9 Volt Games, and today, why do I do that every video? There's only one person who's part of 9 Volt Games anymore. Anyways, today I'm gonna review Resident Evil 3 Remake. I would love to say Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, but they didn't put that in there. But anyways, so here's the deal. Let me get my negatives out of the way. Also, I was asked a couple times, like kind of rushed, more than a couple times. Three separate people asked me, "Are you going to review it now that you beat it?" I like to leave a 2 day rule after I beat a game to review it, or even if I do the review immediately after I beat it, I wait 2 days to post it because, like I said last night in my stream, um, even if it's a game like Doom, if it's a game like Resident Evil, or if it's a game that I didn't particularly like, think about the game 2 days later. Does it still have the same staying power as it did when you beat it? Resident Evil 3, I was excited for. Resident Evil 3, I think, was not that great in the beginning, but in the second half, picked up and it was awesome. And by the time I beat it, I was this was phenomenal. So how do I feel about it 2 days later? Is it still phenomenal? Is it something that's stuck in my memory? Is it something that I'm gonna say, 5 years down the line, be like, oh man, that game was one of the games I played through the amazing quarantine of the coronavirus quarantine and blah blah. Did I like it, because I had nothing else to do, or did I like it because it was actually great? So that's why I wait a couple days before I do reviews. That's probably the only like legitimate process I have when reviewing games. So, anyways, let's get the negative out of the way. Um, I've noticed this. I was talking with my cousin Hank about this. I noticed this with this game and with Doom Eternal. Why is it so hard for reviewers to say it was hard? You don't have to say I didn't like it because, and then you say pacing. Whenever someone says pacing, I automatically go, game is too hard for you. That's what you're saying. That's like saying the pacing of Dark Souls was the only reason I didn't like it. No, it's too hard for you. Just come out and say that. There's no shame in it being like, listen, I didn't like it. The difficulty curve was insane. I can accept that. We can have a discussion about it and be like, well, you missed all this great stuff. So, in the beginning, this is the part I didn't like. They took the Nemesis is up your ass. You don't see him as much as you do in the original game, though. So that was kind of like it was kind of like they made the game shorter. It felt like they made the game shorter. It was a short game. Now, granted, if you go back to these PS1 games, you can beat these games in under 3 hours. I think it's one of the good speed runs on YouTube is under 2 hours, an hour 45 minutes of playing Resident Evil 3 Nemesis on PlayStation 1. This game I beat in 5 hours. I'm sure I play it again. I'll probably beat it in 3. Doesn't mean it's a bad game because it's short. No, there's a lot of quality packed into the game. Here was my problem with it. Nemesis follows you 2 times, two like big times, and then you have more encounters. But if you take the beginning part out, I'm talking about when he lands in the streets when you're running around trying to accomplish things. They put so much detail into these areas, and the streets were very narrow. Very, if you don't have your perfect block down, you're getting hit by something every time. You're always running into something. It's fast paced. There's no downtime. Like you're moving, 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 moving. That's why the game's so quick. You can't really take the time to look around and appreciate the amount of detail that they actually put in this game. You don't have the time to sit there and appreciate the Easter eggs they put in there. I didn't know. I didn't even go in the toy store because you don't have to unless you're doing that jewel thing for the clock tower puzzle. I didn't know there was Mega Man in there until I went through it again because I started playing it again because my son wanted to see it. I didn't notice that stuff the first time through because you have to keep moving. When Nemesis gets dropped in the street that first time, it just rushes you. And I didn't like that. I like the pressure put on you by Nemesis, but the one thing that I miss from the PS1 version to this one is the lack of choice. In the PS1 version, when he broke through a window or he broke through a wall or he ran down an alleyway, it would flash black and white and it would give you an option. You can do this action to put him down for a short amount of time, or you can just fucking fight him or run. It doesn't give you that option. I miss having the options. It's not a game breaking deal. It's not going to make it horrible that they're not in there. There's just certain things that I liked about it, like The one where you're with Carlos and you're in the kitchen in the original one, and you basically can turn on the gas burners and you can blow up the kitchen while Nemesis was in it. That shit it would have been awesome to see that scene in this game, but they didn't have it there. But it more than makes up for it, because what they did with Nemesis in this game, which was a positive, and I'll talk about after the negatives, it made up for these things. But that was just one thing I didn't like. I miss the choices. I do. But it's not something that I would drag the game down for, because they really did their own thing with it, which is another positive I'll go into. One of the negatives, though, like I said, they changed the game. They took out my very favorite scene of Nemesis from the PS1. It's when you're getting out of the clock tower and you think the game is done. You see the helicopter, it starts playing the done music for Resident Evil, and then you just see the fucking missile launcher go up, and Nemesis blows up the helicopter, and then looks at you and starts growling. Like, that was one of my favorite scenes, and it wasn't there. They actually reappropriated that scene to the beginning of the game, and it sucked. When you're going up the parking garage, and then the helicopter's there, and the guys like get in, and then Nemesis annihilates the fucking helicopter. I mean, that was a cool scene, but I would have loved to see that clock tower scene. Like, when I heard they were remaking Resident Evil Nemesis, I thought about all these great scenes through the game, and like the one where you're in the clinic and all the zombies come through the window, and you think that Nikolai eats it, and he doesn't. Like, that scene wasn't in there. They definitely ramped up making Nikolai a dude you want to punch in the face. So I'm also not upset about that scene, but when they said they were remaking it, I just pictured all these great scenes, and they weren't in the game. So that's a negative, but again, not something I'm going to drop a score for or anything like that. It's just, I think what makes these Resident Evil remakes different, good, is that they're the same base story, but they're so different from what you were expecting before that it's kind of refreshing. And I'm hoping they do the same thing with Final Fantasy VII, by the way, and we'll find out in a few days. But so those are really my negatives. It's like I kind of hyped myself up for something that I wasn't sure was even going to be in the game, and then so basically the shortcomings of this game are on me. Really, they're on me and my expectations. But really, the beginning of the game, it felt really rushed. Not like the game developers rushed the game. It rushed you too much that you couldn't appreciate like the beginning parts of Raccoon City in the streets. Because once you hit a certain point, Nemesis comes out and he doesn't leave until you finish everything. So my word of advice is, if you haven't played it yet, right when you get out in the streets and you're Nemesis free, do everything that you want to do, no matter how overwhelming it is with zombies. They're pretty easy to dispatch. They leave the explosive barrels everywhere. I personally would leave the explosive barrels now after my first playthrough for when Nemesis comes out in the street, because he drops items. When you knock him down, you get parts for your handgun and ammo and all that shit. But I digress. That part really kind of it turned me off. I beat this game in 2 streams, and the first stream was that part, and you could probably see it in my face. I was not impressed, and it was hard because the gameplay is really tight. It's a good game. They put some effort in. They've been working on it for a while. It was not rushed. I've seen people saying that they think the game was rushed. It was not rushed. It was amazing. I still think that Resident Evil 2 was better in terms of everything that they give you, but this was a quick game, and it wasn't a quick game because they forced you to because they made it quick. They forced you to be quick, and that kind of sucked. But also, you knew that was coming because Nemesis, that's the whole hook of the game, is that he's following you the whole time. This game, by the way, Resident Evil Nemesis on PS1 was not supposed to be Resident Evil 3. It was supposed to be a side game just about Nemesis, and then they put Resident Evil 3 on it. Resident Evil Code Veronica was supposed to be 3. Keep that in mind. So, what's great about this game? Jill is a badass. She is an extreme badass. She is now, in my opinion, the most badass Resident Evil character. She is fucking tough. And the best part was they made her extremely badass without shoving an agenda down your throat. That's the number one thing I love about this game. In a world of weird climate that we got with politically correct, they made Jill an extreme badass without making the point of her being like, I am a badass. and I'm a girl. You know what I'm saying? They just made her like I'm a human and I'm a badass, and I like that. That's a way that you do something and show the strengths of people regardless of gender without jamming it down your throat. You know what I mean? And the best part was she was more badass than Carlos. And Carlos played his part amazingly, and I like that they let you play as Carlos more. Carlos was an awesome, relatable character. He was cocky, and he was kind of an asshole, and then his character developed. You know what I mean? Like, they made him caring in the beginning, and then he was, like, trying to get handsy with Jill, and she was like, nope. And then, so it's like, they didn't have deep character development for him, but they made him grow in the sense of, why don't you care about people to just care about people? You know what I mean? And then you could see that over time, and they did it naturally. They didn't like force it or anything like that, and that was awesome. So the way that they did the characters in this game as opposed to any other game that I believe Capcom has done was awesome. They did a really awesome job. The way that the events went, even though it was fast and it was different than the Resident Evil 3, and it still ended up like Resident Evil 3, Nemesis, Resident Evil 3 Remake was like, and then met at the same type of ending. What I truly loved about it was the same, but they made it so different that this was a game, Resident Evil Nemesis on PlayStation 1 was a game I hold near and dear to my heart. It was my favorite Resident Evil of the PS1 era, and they took it and they made it so different but kept it enough the same where I could appreciate a new experience with these characters in this story that I loved since I was a teenager. And they made it better. They made everything about it better. So while I'm upset because the cutscenes I loved weren't in there, they added enough, and they added an evolution of the Nemesis that was just amazing. It was amazing. I didn't like his last form. He looked like a giant turd. He literally slid out of a hole in the wall that looked like a butthole and looked like a giant turd. So, and then it broke open, and then it showed his final form, and he was amazing. So, I don't know. The game was short. I haven't played Resident Evil Resistance. The thing that I gripe with is that the game is so short, and if you're going to be turned off by that constant anxiety, you have to move, not a lot of time for exploration, you might not think that the game's worth $60. And I'll stand behind that. I was telling Hank that I think this game should have been a $39.99 game without Resident Evil Resistance, and people probably wouldn't have been so upset about it. I stand by that. This game should have been $20 cheaper than it was. However, being a huge fan of Resident Evil, and especially Resident Evil 3 being one of my favorites, and the gameplay being tight, the graphics being amazing, the story being well thought out and developed, and it carried on at a fast pace. It was like watching a movie that you interacted with at the oh shit moments. There's plenty of ammo to be had. You got to think on your feet. It was a good game in a short burst. I don't think I could have done 10 hours of that much pressure and anxiety on me. So I think that the game was actually perfect. It's just sad that the game came out at $60, and I think that's the hate that it really gets, and people don't want to say the game was hard and it shouldn't have been $60. I can agree with those points. This game was difficult, but it was rewarding. So if you like that, if you liked Resident Evil 2, they made improvement tweaks on the gameplay. I still personally think that the Resident Evil 2 remake was better just for the scope of it, but this one was still great. So if people are going to go back and say Resident Evil 2 was better and just leave it at that, that's not fair. Resident Evil 2 remake was a phenomenal remake, and you're comparing it to something that was already amazing. This is amazing too. So if you're a fan of Resident Evil, if you're a fan of Nemesis, and you want to see the evolution of it, when he was in his like weird dog form running around on all fours, that shit had my heart racing. This game made me jump. The last thing that made me jump in my seat when I was playing anything was PT. There was a couple scenes that made me jump. There was a bunch of scenes where I was tensed up in my chair. Like, it's worth the price of admission to me. But if you want to wait for the price drop, I can't fault you for that. But check it out. It's amazing. Thank you guys for watching.